I've told Eric this before, but just whenever I heard about the stone table, like it means so much to have something like this. I remember at North Central in like 2014, the first time I heard a sermon that was directed to people going into the marketplace. My dad was a youth pastor, first generation Christian. All my siblings went into ministry. And I was the one black sheep that kind of went into the marketplace, but felt this strong calling ever since I was in sophomore in high school to pursue filmmaking and to show people the beauty of God and the beauty of people. And so for the past 10 years, Morgan and I have been creating, like Eric said, creating films that are about national brands and everyday people. Our films and our cameras have taken us into the lives of people that live in mansions and people that live in homeless encampments. Our goal has never been to strike it rich by creating films, but we strive to enrich people with the films that we create. Our films have been screened in churches, in bars, museums, and hospital rooms. In hindsight, whenever we look back on the past 10 years as a company, like it's evident that God has sustained us as a company. But we didn't plan to start a business. So here's a little bit of what kind of started it.
No.
Go for it. No, Mike.
Yeah, so as mentioned, I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the neighborhood where I was born and raised, it was on the news often, but not for the greatest things. Homicides and theft were very common, and the brokenness of sin often manifested its ugly face. But at a very young age, I loved Jesus with all my heart. And I knew my neighbors and they knew me. We were the minority in our neighborhood and church, but that didn't stop me from seeing the people around me as anything different. Just like me, they went to school, they played at the park, and they had families. So jump ahead to 2013. Josh and I are 18 and 19. We're in college and dating, and we ride our bikes everywhere we go. So one day, our professor at North Central shared with us about a film competition. And the criteria was this: to make a 3 to 5 minute film about your neighborhood and why you loved it. And so right away, I knew we were to make it about my neighborhood. Our goal wasn't to win the film festival, but instead we wanted to shift at least one person's perspective. We wanted to show the humanity of the people living there and the good things that were going on. So before going out to film, Josh and I would pray, and every person that we would come across and who was willing to be interviewed, it was as if we struck gold. And one person that we interviewed, he shared this: if you're looking for trouble, you're gonna find that. If you're looking for good and your mind is open to that, you're gonna find that too. So our film, Welcome to North, quickly went viral. There was a lot of positive feedback, and it brought a huge sense of pride to my neighborhood. The night of the film festival, not only did we win audience choice, we also won first place, which were both cash prizes. So we upgraded our bikes that we were riding around everywhere to a car, got some new equipment for filming instead of this like 80s road microphone thing.
That I bought for 25 cents at a garage
sale. You just
sale.
work with what you got. And word about us began to spread, and really quickly. And our friend, who was a banker at the time, told us, he's like, you guys should start an LLC. And so at the age of 18 and 19, with a lot of prayer, but a lot of peace from God, we started Chitwood Media in 2014. And a few months later, we got married.
Yeah, so that was in 2014. So jumping to 2021, during that time, we had grown our business and our family. We have 3 little boys as well. But in 2021, we felt God telling us to move to Indianapolis. It's a long story within itself. My parents are both from Indianapolis, raised in Illinois, moved to Minneapolis, and then came to Indianapolis. And people were very confused, like, you're moving from Minneapolis to Indianapolis, Minneapolis. So got the polis. We moved here to the Hawthorne neighborhood on the west side of Indianapolis, close to George Washington High School, near the zoo. And quickly, it's become our home. And neighbors have become our friends. And we found ourselves roughly 10 years after making Welcome to North. We were actually hired by the community center in our neighborhood to tell the 100-year-old history of our neighborhood in under 20 minutes. So that was kind of like a big ask. And so like with this film, like we really wanted to capture each era of the neighborhood. We wanted to capture stories that people could see themselves in and also know to be true and that they could relate to. And so we made the film and had 3 really nice, small, intimate like neighborhood screenings, and then also we're in 6 different film festivals throughout Indiana, and then one up in Michigan. And one moment from those festivals that really resonated with us, that really sticks out to us, was at the Bloomington, Indiana International Film Festival. And so the screen had just filmed. Morgan and I were sitting on the stage at the film festival. They were doing a Q&A. We're in a college town bar, not like a Christian, like typical church setting. We're out in the marketplace, in the world. And one of the festival hosts, after watching our film and during this Q&A, he said something like this: After watching your film, I noticed how much it reveals the beauty in people. You two seem to be so pro-human. Why is that? This curiosity created a space for Morgan and I to share our faith and to just share the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Thinking back on that question right now, I think about when Jesus told his disciples to be the salt of the earth. In Matthew 5:13, Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." This analogy of salt is both about our vocation as Jesus followers, but is also a warning if we follow our own way. Jesus wants us to become his salt, a salt that preserves, a salt that enhances, and a salt that is truly salt.
We practiced, so we kept on handing
the mic,
little things back and forth.
It's gonna be 2 mics, so.
So if you're taking notes, here comes point number 1. So salt preserves the earth. So when salt is preserving food, the goal is to keep the original state of the food, the goodness and the freshness of day 1. So back in May, Josh and I took a trip to St. Augustine, Florida for our 10 years of marriage and work together. And several times during that trip, we went out to watch the sunrise. And the best part actually wasn't the sunrise. It was the fact that as the sun slowly made its way above the horizon, just more and more people would come out to witness it take place. It was as if there was an unofficial event summoning people to come and gather at 6 a.m. and maybe even sacrificing sleep to get out there, just to partake in something beautiful. And whether they acknowledged the creator of the sunrise or not, they could look at the sunrise and say, that's good. And in a similar way, salt, Jesus' followers, are like the beauty of the sunrise. And just like the sunrise, we are to reflect and to point back to our creator. And when we function as salt, our lives won't be focused on the rot and the decay around us, but instead we point others, as well as sometimes ourselves, to God's original intent for his creation, which is to worship him. And it's in this act of worship that we reflect his beauty and his goodness and his truth. And we walk in step with God, manifesting his kingdom here today. And sometimes the sunrise can be more clouded, and sometimes it's bright and glorious. And often days, that's kind of how our witness can be. But by God's grace, we rise to approach each day's tasks and projects and assignments with eyes open to see his goodness and to reveal it to others.
So our second point, if you're taking notes and take away from that verse, is that salt enhances the earth. So I love cooking, and anyone that likes to cook or knows how to cook, you know that whenever you add salt, it brings out the goodness in a dish. And if you add too much salt, you have an oversalted dish, and no one likes an oversalted dish. Similarly, no one likes a salty Christian. Someone who's often upset, bitter, angry, rude, or overly critical. Rather than being the loudest in the culture wars, we believe that Jesus is calling each of us to practice the act of culture care, to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. In our work, we've filmed interviews with all types of people. We do a lot of documentary work, so we were put in a lot of situations where we have to have conversations with people. And we've interviewed politicians and pastors, scientists and sex offenders, activists and architects, but they all have one thing in common. They want to be heard and they want to communicate clearly. And so as their interviewer, our job is to make sure that they're comfortable and that they feel heard. So we have to make sure, if we want to have thoughtful dialogue, we have to listen intently and truly be present with them. And when we're able to do this, we're able to create a trust that then we can go deeper into the deeper questions, but even give pushback on certain things. And that's how you get an authentic story when you're interviewing someone. And no matter who sits on the other side of the camera, this is true. They were made in the image of a glorious creator that loves them. And so then I think about like what would happen then if we truly saw each other this way.
So our last point is that salt needs to be salt. So as Jesus talked to his followers, he told them that they were salt. As Josh and I have shared, the vocation of salt, so serving as a preservative as well as an enhancer. But buckle up, here comes the warning. So Jesus says, if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. In other words, he's saying, if you, a follower of Jesus, are not following Jesus, what's the point? Is it good for anything? Ouch. It's easy to point out areas of cultural decay around us, but are we willing to acknowledge our own lack of salt? Many days I personally feel overwhelmed by the weight of wickedness and brokenness in our world. We may all respond differently to this weight, and perhaps it's anxiety or being pessimistic, depressed or numb, overwhelmed or cynical. But without the love of Jesus, we risk following into either the way of culture or have our hearts hardened towards culture. And our emotions and our circumstances, they're always changing. We all know this. But the truth of who God is always remains. And sometimes our job is to be salt to ourselves before salting others. And to come back to that God's original intent for us to worship and to commune with him. You cannot be Jesus' salt without Jesus. So how does salt become salty? How do followers of Christ become useful again? It looks like going back to the source. Spending time with Jesus, becoming like him, and doing what he did. Only then are we able to preserve and enhance the world around us. Otherwise, what's the point?
So over the years, I've been deeply hurt by a lot of people, both inside and outside of the church. Within our business, we've dealt with incredibly difficult clients and have even had death threats from one of them. Being the salt of the earth does not come easy. When I said earlier that God has sustained our business over the years, I'm not just talking about project bids and cool opportunities. Sorry, lost my spot. Okay. When we feel like we have nothing left to give, God has sustained us. If we want to be salt in the marketplace, in the long run, we need to prioritize prayer before being productive. I want to practice the words of the Apostle Paul. Devote yourselves to prayer. Be watchful and thankful. Be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. May we be a people, the people in this room, be a people with conversations seasoned with salt. A salt that preserves, a salt that enhances, and a salt that is truly salt. As you go about your day, remember this. Jesus wants you to be salt in the office, on the job site, during that meeting, and in your own home. You are to be salt in every corner of your life. So go and be the salt of Christ wherever he has placed you. Amen.